Hello, and welcome to this short explanation of break-even and margin of safety. In order to carry out break-even analysis, you need to know about contribution. So the contribution you get when you sell a product is the difference between the selling price and the variable costs for that unit. Or if you're looking at the whole business, the total contribution is the sales revenue minus the total variable costs. As you presumably appreciate, profit is sales revenue minus all costs. So if we take the total contribution from which we've already subtracted the variable costs, and then we subtract the non-variable costs, that will give us the profit. Non-variable costs may also be known as fixed costs. If you need to know more about variable costs and non-variable costs, please see our video on cost structure. Right, let's have a look at an example. So, if you sell something for £1 and you spent 40 pence on your variable costs, then your contribution is 60 pence. Every time you sell a product, you're better off by 60 pence. Looking at a whole period, if your revenue is £100 and your variable costs were 40, then you've made a total contribution of £60 in the period. Now, if in that period your non-variable costs were £25, then 60 minus 25 is £35. That would be the profit for that period. Right, at low levels of output, total costs are usually higher than revenue and businesses make a loss. And for decision making, it's often useful to know how much output is required for this loss to become zero. And this is known as the break-even point. Right, as we saw earlier, profit is contribution minus non-variable costs. So when the profit is zero, the contribution and the non-variable costs must be the same. So the contribution is just paying for the non-variable costs. So how many units do we need for that? Well, if we take our non-variable costs and divide it by the contribution we get for 1 unit, that will tell us how many units we need. So that there at the bottom is how we work out the break-even point in units. Let's see that in an example. So if our selling price is £15 and the variable costs are 6, that's a contribution of £9 per unit. Divide the 9 into £630,000, and for this business you need to sell 70,000 units in order to break even. If you're not keen on the calculations, you can just draw a graph, and where the revenue line and the total cost line cross, that number of units is your break-even point. Right. Break-even is related to risk because the higher the break-even, the less likely it is you'll sell enough units to make a profit. And the gap between the number of units you're planning to sell and this break-even point is called the margin of safety. So you would like that to be as big as possible. It's often expressed as a percentage of the planned sales. So let's see an example of that. So if our break-even is 70,000 and our planned sales are 100,000, the margin of safety is 30,000 units. 30,000 units as a percentage of the 100,000 planned sales is 30%. So you would only lose money in this case if sales were 30% below plan, which is probably not very likely. Right, instead of expressing a break-even point in units, we might want to measure it in pounds. How much revenue do we need to break even? So you can just use the break-even point we've already calculated and multiply it by the selling price per unit. So our 70,000 units we had, it's £15 per unit. That tells us our sales revenue would have to be £1,050,000 for us to break even. Another way of working this out is to take the non-variable costs and divide them by the contribution we get for each pound's worth of sales. And that will tell us how many pounds of sales we need. How do we work out the contribution per pound of sales? We take the contribution for a unit and divide it by the selling price for that unit. This ratio is also known as the contribution sales ratio or the CS ratio. See how that works. So same example as before, the contribution is £9 and the selling price is £15. So for every £1 of sales, we get a contribution of 60 pence. So how many 60 pence do we need? To provide our non-variable costs, we divide them out and we get 1,050. So, sorry, apologise. £1,050,000 is how much we have to sell in order to break even, which fortunately is the same answer that we had before. And that covers the essentials of break-even and margin of safety. If you would like further information on this, please follow the link on the next slide. Thank you for your attention. I hope you found this video useful.